Brilliant. So we always have our green stream session at the end of our monthly meetings where we try to get to know some of our members or some of our members' friends and people who they know in the industry and what they're doing. This month, it's a turn of the DTG. Ed and Alex, I don't know if you're both going to co-present, but we'll point the mic at Ed first of all, I think. So, or Alex, I don't mind.
I think the plan for us is Alex is going to talk about us a little bit because he already has something for that, and then we're going to go to me, and I am going to present our zoo for you guys, so you actually know what we mean when we say that word.
Yes. So yeah, I was going to do a quick intro on DTG, very high level, and then just use it as an opportunity to kind of hand over to Ed as well, because Ed's going to be taking over from me in these groups. So I'll just share my screen quick. I haven't got loads of slides or anything. It's just a real high level kind of overview. So DTG, so was myself and Ed, and now Simon Jones as well. We're delighted to welcome to us as well. So he's moving from BT to help us out with some activities in DTG. So we're well represented here. So we're a digital TV group. We're a research and technology organisation, so an RTO. So we're essentially kind of industry association for the TV world, and we have members across a kind of broad range of interests within the TV industry. Founded about, well, it says there 1995, so we've been around for quite a while, helping the TV industry through switchovers, through spectrum changes, through upgrades to the technology, and all sorts of things, and there's plenty more to come as well. So our kind of role is to try and steer the industry in a coherent direction, a coordinated direction, and hopefully they don't go off and create all sorts of different technology that at the end of the day doesn't help the consumer. So to do this, we run plenty of working groups. We have expert forums, very similar to Greening of Streaming. So it's exactly the same model. We look at things like accessibility, cybersecurity, distribution, next generation media, and then some very technical things like RF, system signaling information, and production making and special events. So lots of very detailed stuff, lots of very kind of high level stuff, lots of very kind of strategic type stuff. What are the challenges the industry faces? Yeah, so we have detailed meetings, and we also have things like major events and kind of workshops and things like that as well. That's just a very short bit about our structure. As I mentioned there, we have kind of high level kind of strategic thought leadership industry events. The main one is our DTG Summit, which we have every kind of May time, about 300 attendees. And it's really kind of what's the vision for the industry, through to we have these kind of very technical plugfest sessions where a lot of brilliant engineering minds from all over Europe come together and connect together all the different types of kit and configure things on the fly and get everything working together. So it's a really interesting couple of days and takes some massive amount of coordination, which is a great achievement for the DTG engineers here. So yeah, we do a real mixture of practical, hands-on activities and thought leadership. And yeah, we have a council and a steering group and all of those kind of things, I guess you'd expect from any membership organisation. Here's some of the things we've been up to. I guess actually this slide's fairly old, to be honest, but yeah, our main bread and butter is the D-Book. This is a standard which is used to set out how TV is distributed in the UK. So broadcast TV we're talking about there. And I guess the main thing there is that any TV that enters the UK market has to be tested against the D-Book before it gets sold. So anything supporting broadcast TV goes through our D-Book testing. So it's quite a major influence on what goes into the UK market. We also produce various other guides. The R book there is a kind of spectrum type thing. One of our major areas of work at the moment is cybersecurity. So that's a major factor for TV manufacturers now. Any internet connected product has to pass cybersecurity tests. So we test those on our premises here through our partner organisation, Safe Shark. And I guess one of the other technical activities, this is 2022, one of the other main things we're looking at now is DVB-I as well. So what's the kind of convergence of broadcast and broadband technology over the coming years? I'll leave testing for now because that's Ed's domain. So I'll hand over to him in a sec. Some of the other key kind of areas we're looking at policy. So there's a lot of things looking at, especially at the moment, about the future of TV delivery. There's a lot of talk about the demise of broadcast and the growth of internet television, but that's not entirely true. And in fact, broadcast and broadband are going to converge together and are going to coexist for a long time to come. So there's a lot of things looking at how that's going to work over the next 10 years or so. And that includes things like the media bill, which is expected out any time, well, as parliamentary time allows, I think is the phrase. So how long's a piece of string, but hopefully sometime soon. But yeah, I mentioned the cybersecurity. There's laws coming out for that as well. So we're very much across that kind of thing and online type activities. Yeah, all of this, well, this kind of complicated style diagram is again kind of showing that convergence of broadcast and so the transition from analog to digital to IP and kind of how that all going to work over the next 10 years or so. So we're running a program called the Future Pathway, which is designed to kind of ensure that transition is a smooth one, ensure there's no consumers left behind. There was a great example recently, actually, well, great example from the kind of what would happen if we switched off broadcast, but one of the transmitter towers burnt down in the north of England. And it was a real example of, okay, well, what if you switched off broadcast today, what would happen? And in fact, a lot of people really struggled and they found it difficult to move entirely onto an IP platform. So yeah, we're looking at all of these things and trying to set out a bit of a blueprint for the future over the next 10 years or so. And so that's very much a whistle-stop tour of the DTG as a whole. How we've been involved in greening and streaming and energy efficiency is through our testing, and through our handover to Ed. So I was going to be our liaison for greening and streaming for DTG, but in fact, we're going to be starting a new project, which is going to get announced tomorrow. In fact, looking at 5G for delivering TV and Open RAN. It's going to be a major bit of work over the next 18 months. So that's public launch tomorrow. So I'm going to be heading up that program. And Ed is going to be a man on the ground at greening and streaming and managing our work there. So Ed's going to tell you a bit more about the practical side of DTG and our testing and our zoo and how that relates to what we're doing here at greening and streaming. So I'll hand over to Ed, and that is an introduction to you, Ed, to kind of carry on this great work at greening and streaming as well.
Yes, I'm delighted to be here. So, yeah, as Alex said, we do a lot of different stuff. In about 2020, 2021, we ended up getting heavily involved in power consumption testing for a number of different customers, and this resulted in us doing a large project for radios, a large project for television, and then writing a bunch of reports for both of those, and we've ended up getting involved with you guys over in Green and Stream probably as a result of that partially. So a lot of that was done in our zoo for the television. Downstairs it was done in our One Direction anechoic chamber for the radios, and we also did like IP devices and that kind of thing. So I'll share my screen to show you what the zoo is, because we'll constantly use the word zoo, but it's not a zoo of animals. So I'll share my screen. I'll just share screen because I'll show you a picture after, so you're about to see a giant picture of Alex, but don't worry about that. There you go. Okay, there's no Alex, is there?
No.
Good. So let's slap that in presentation mode. So DTG Zoo, it's got a location of my contacts on it. I said you'd slide if you want it, but we don't necessarily have you got my contact anyway. So what is the zoo? The DTG Zoo is a collection of, it's 200 receivers now of various TV, set-top boxes, DVRs. It is primarily televisions now, because DTRs, set-top boxes, and DVRs have all more or less gone out the window, with digital TV now being very well established. I think the latest one is from Manhattan, and that's probably the only one we're going to see coming through the door. Our zoo has a bunch of legacy devices, so the older MHEG stuff, that's like for the people are doing the terrestrial platforms, etc., in case they make any changes, but we're slowly cycling those out. So there's only dual stack and HBTV stuff, because most of the zoo's work is more the modern stuff. So stuff from like 2012 onwards is what's in the zoo these days. We cover about 95% of the HBTV devices in the market. So for HBTV app developers and people interested in app development, that's very good. And also that more or less means we cover a large amount of what's actually out there. As far as stuff that can use apps, which is relevant for power consumption measurements for a greening people. So yeah, I think the last time we did a call home to the server, the zoo actually covered about 98.2% of all devices in the market. The final percent was virtually not worth trying to cover because it was hundreds of devices which just don't sell. The zoo has all sorts of connectivity in it, so every single device is connected to the internet and to the RF at the same time. So you can have terrestrial on it. There's Virgin Media feeds in there, Sky feeds. It's got a steerable dish in it, and so there's a constant fixed connection to Astra 28.2, which is coincidentally the Sky and the FreeSat feed. But there's also a steerable dish with like 12 programs in there to point to some of the European dishes if you need it. Everything's connected to the internet, and there's Wi-Fi in there. But that means we have about 200 devices which can be power consumption tested at the same time if you required. We split into two zoos. So we have Battersea Zoo and another one which is called Westminster Zoo, because they're the two landmarks you can see out the window from them. So each room has about 100 receivers in it. There's only reason it's split over. It used to be one, but we moved, so we split it into two because we could only fit 100 receivers per room. But they're all connected to the same central point. So we do loads of stuff in there. So we've done targeted advertisement testing, we've done app testing, we've provided support for developers who are making apps for both the App Store and for HBTV applications. We help the broadcasters and transmitter verification. We do interference testing, which we've done for the government and for Ofcom on both 4G and 5G, when 4G and 5G have been implemented. HMI interoperability testing. We've done power consumption testing even for like those USB connections that you'll stick into your television. We've measured the power consumption of those for the people who make them, so they know how much power they can actually draw out the telly, and various other things. Compliance testing, there's comparison testing, load testing, as I said before. So the zoo does quite a few things. It's got hiring options. Not relevant to you. This is a spiel document for people to hire out it. So we'll probably talk on a more project by project basis when it comes to actually hiring it out, rather than what's on there. You mentioned it before. That's the picture of the TAPO plug. So that's me measuring it on a telly. See if we can get a good zoom on it. Teams isn't the best. Teams is terrible, actually. But yeah, the plug's there. That's the TAPO plug. And it's going into the power meter. And that's so I can check what it's drawing out. It's remote connected to my laptop. So using the script that's been put together, we've managed to draw power out of it. This is just a console, so because you're drawing the console off it, you can then get a JSON folder off it, or you can live feed it into a server, etc. So it's a pretty good little plug for that. I thought I'd put picture to what we were saying.
Awesome.
You can kind of imagine the setup. The setup is literally just a plug. So you don't actually need this bit. This bit's just there to verify that the plug is measuring what it says it's measuring, and it is within plus or minus 1 watt. So when it comes to actually setting it up, you just plug your TV into the wall and connect it to the Wi-Fi and your device that you're receiving it from. Run the script, and away you go. And you can run more
blended,
so you can get multiple devices going at the same time. And it's just up to software engineers to do more of the next steps as far as getting the data compiled and extracted. Yeah, that's more or less us.
Awesome, Ed. Thank you both, Ed and Alex. Folks, like since we've got the chaps here focused on DTG, do you folks have any questions for them? I've got a couple of leaders to get you started if you get the juices flowing. So something that occurred to me while you were talking, Alex, is the D-Book a licensing requirement to sell a set-top box, or is it a sort of more of a compliance certification to say this will work with Freeview and so on? How does that?
Yeah, so it's a licensing requirement for the Freeview brand. So yeah,
brand.
and then it basically checks all the kind of broadcast elements, that are compatible with the signaling requirements and the localization, the regionalization, and robust to interference, and there's some HBB-TV requirements in there and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's fundamentally so you can get the kind of Freeview Play badge on your TV, or the Freeview Plus badge on your TV, and that kind of thing. And we do testing with all the kind of players and stuff like that. So 4 on demand and iPlayer and all those kind of things as well.
Cool. Excellent.
I've got a question actually. How do you deal with brightness on the TVs and in the zoo? Is it just the stream you're measuring, or how do you deal with that kind of the power usage of the TV on all the different devices? And
so that depends on the test case. So for Carnstone, I don't know if we could mention too much about that, but we can give you the rough overline, I think, Alex.
Yeah, so I've mentioned before we did some work for Carnstone, but we've not published, or sorry, they've not publicly published the report yet, but we can give you some description of the methods that we use to do the testing now. So that's fine, Ed, if you want to describe that.
That's okay. So we did the factory default state test. So we didn't do any adjustments to the settings initially, and then we ran it with SD, HD, UHD, Netflix, I think we use Now TV and loads of other service providers, including Spotify. Took all the power measurements on that on similar content. So we went through the content to find content which had a similar color scheme, brightness level for the recordings, etc., just so that you don't have a really dark program versus a very bright program, because that's going to make a big difference. So we did that all on default, which created our base. We then did an adjustment where we put it in a slightly brighter settings, turned off the energy saving measurements, which are default to the receiver, etc. And that involved a bunch of research into it to decide which settings to turn off for which receiver. And then we talked to Carnstone about what they agree with. They came up with what they agreed with for having that switched off and not. So like some TVs, it would be like put it in sports mode, which turns up the brightness, turn off all the energy saving methods, etc., just to make sure the screen's brighter. One of the key things was to make sure that I've forgotten the technical word for it, but as the daylight moves, it changes the screen brightness throughout the day, which would have had a big impact on the testing in the zoo, because we're doing it over the course of several weeks. So you don't want to take one measurement in the morning when the sun's blaring, and one measurement in the evening when it's not blaring, and have 2 different measurements from the same test. Wow. So stuff like that. So it was a long process to decide what to turn off and what not to turn off. But the most important thing for us generally was the default mode, because people plug in their TV and they watch telly. They don't generally faff about with it that much. Not the average user anyway, so that covers the majority of people. But then we had a setting which was like, how bright can we make it that somebody would actually watch in, rather than the brightest it can be. So stuff like sports mode, cinema mode, various other high luminance methods, and also we're checking like SDR, HDR. So big things, just power consumption. When it swaps from SDR to HDR, it can have a big difference on it, etc., which is one of the key things in the report, I think.
Excellent, thanks.
Really interesting, really good. Any other questions, Alex?
I was just going to say, we're looking to share a lot of this methodology in Working Group 8, so we can help design the tests, because as you heard, there's quite a lot to consider. So
yeah,
so, that's awesome.
On the next Working Group 8 meeting, we're just putting together the spreadsheet which we can show the draft outline of what we did for Carnstone in detail, cool. So that we can present that to kind of show not just what we've done, but how we've done it. So you can also make sure you don't repeat the same stuff we've already done, which is already released. and then just get a good idea of the methodology as well as the time that certain things can take. So at the time we weren't using a automated test method like we are now, which helped.
Awesome. Fascinating. Rudolph, you came on camera.
Oh,
do you have a question?
well, yeah, sorry, I was called by a lawyer of a client. Yeah, I just wanted to also look at, streaming apps, services, and whether you see any difference there, or whether different types of codecs, even with the same kind of output, do have different energy consumption.
And we weren't looking at codec specifically when it comes to streaming applications, when we were checking different types of video, etc. Key things we've noticed is like if you're playing House of Dragons versus, say, a game show, the game show has much greater brightness to it. So the game show ends up drawing a significant amount more power consumption than, say, House of Dragons did, which generally has a slightly darker theme to it. But we weren't checking what the codecs were, etc. So they wouldn't be able to feed that on that specifically.
I think it's very much going to play into the working group 6 work. So, sorry, Anne.
I was going to say, yeah, we did check though. So the premise of the test was check the different types of content. So broadcast, broadband, check on a bunch of different players. Check what happens if you're using peripheral devices, so Xboxes, Roku sticks, whatever. And then also check what happens with the router as well, in terms of its usage if you're streaming different types of things. So that was the kind of a very high level outline of what we were testing.
Really cool. I've got just as I think we're sort of coming up to the hour, so unless anyone else has any other questions. Simon, you've come on camera. Do you have a question?
Just a quick question about measuring the power that the Tapo device itself uses, because I've got a couple. I've plugged one inside of the other, and it does consume that, and that might be the difference you're seeing. So you need to take that out of the equation. And I also did some quick tests with some HDR and SDR content, exactly the same source camera. And HDR is the biggest factor I've seen in that. But what I propose to do is to repeat this test probably in a couple of weeks and share that into the group, because I used a different setup to configure the Tapo, so it's fairly easy to do with things like Home Assistant.
You're already using the Tapo. It was you, I think, that suggested.
Yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Cool. We're all slowly moving onto the same test. So if you're doing any tests in this place, please get in touch with us so that we all get on the same meter. We can then at least have some sense that we're comparing, say, apples and apples. And so I've just got one last question, really for the DTG. What do you consider not digital television, but in the streaming space? Is there sort of a OTT streaming model element, or is there a scope which you draw around the digital TV group's domain that might exclude some types of video, maybe conferencing or what? I just wondered if there's a definition or a boundary to your investigations.
Well, I mean, I guess in a nutshell, we look at the kind of traditional types of TV delivery. So there's obviously the broadcast and the linear side of it, but then there's the OTT platforms. And then there's various kind of flavors of that. So fast is a new thing that seems to be kind of the buzzword in the industry at the moment, which is basically linear TV online. But yeah, it's still TV as far as we're concerned. And then obviously we work with a lot of the platforms, Sky and Virgin, and those kind of things as well. So I guess where we probably don't get involved too much are things like YouTube and Twitch or Periscope, or those kind of I guess mobile broadcasting type applications. They don't really fall under the same kind of legislation and rules and regulation and that kind of framework that TV sits under. So that's probably where we draw the line. It's probably anything that you're going to be expected to watch on a large screen, really.
A large screen, yeah. I was going to say, it's basically the TV screen and the intelligence behind that.
Yeah. television apps, we might help them in the zoo if they need requirements and help in the zoo, etc. But we don't necessarily regulate television apps ourselves. That's generally the manufacturer.
Yeah.
But as I say, we are looking at 5G and you know, how that could be used as a distribution platform for TV providers. So through broadcast potentially or something like that. So yeah, we do get involved in that, but yeah, testing and measurement is generally big screen stuff.
Yeah,
I think I've got a slide deck from 2014 which has a TV, has a fantasy TV with a 5G SIM card slot in it. I think they got bypassed. I think they're now eSIMs anyway. But there you go. So good. Okay, listen, Ed, Alex, thank you so much for that sort of roundup of what's going on in the DTG and what's going on between us and the DTG. It's really useful. Really appreciate the affiliation there. It's and I really enjoying the particularly the focus in working group 8. I think that we're taking some interesting steps forward together there. So thank you, and thanks to everyone for turning up. Thanks to all our members for being members. And I think with that, I'm going to say I'll see you at IBC because I've got to go and pack a bag and find a train. Well, no, book cabs and that sort of thing. So cool. We'll see those of you who are going there, and if not, we'll be in touch online and to the next monthly members meeting or working groups.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers,
Okay.
folks.
Cheers,
Speak soon.
all.
Safe travels.
Cheers.
Cheers.
yeah.
Bye.